Welcome back. Venture capitalist and political strategist Bradley Tusk writing an op-ed in Canada's Globe and Mail today about Donald Trump's second presidency and its potential tariffs. It was titled, "Canada Must Realize It's in a Knife Fight with Donald Trump. There is no win-win." Tusk had some negotiating advice and tough love for the country's business leaders, concluding Canada's usual niceness doesn't matter when it comes to dealing with Trump's tactics, writing, "Be true to who you are and let the Canadian people suffer, or fight fire with fire. I know what I would choose." Joining me now to discuss that, along with what tech regulation could look like under Trump 2.0, is Bradley Tusk, the managing partner and co-founder of Tusk Venture Partners. Are you Canadian, Bradley? This is strongly worded to your...
No, not at all. They invited me to come speak to the Business Council of Canada last week, and I went up there and kind of explained how I would take on these issues, and I was struck by both how earnest and well-intentioned and nice they were, and at the same time, how all of their ideas to me seemed totally pointless in dealing with someone like Donald Trump.
What were some of those ideas?
We can find a win-win by showing joint, mutual benefit on economic partnership and trade and military, and how he'll listen to reason, and we can get him to see that there's areas of compromise. And, my words to them was like, listen, guys, he cares about being loved, he cares about being admired, he cares about being feared. And there's one of two ways to deal with him, and reality, pretty much every politician, which is either show them that what you want is in their best interest politically, will help them with their next election and make them look good. Or if you can't do that, show them that what you want, if they don't do it, will hurt them in their next election. So, the first thing that they should try to do is reach a deal with him. And I think that, look, when I look at the map, the one country standing between the United States and Greenland is Canada. I think it's kind of silly that Trump wants to acquire Greenland, and I think most Canadian people probably do too. But you know what? Who cares, right? If the question is 25% tariffs on all Canadian products, or you say, hey, we're on board with Trump's Greenland plan and we're going to help, do that, right? Or milk. Everyone kept telling me when I was there about how there was, the milk guys are so powerful, and Trump is upset because he thinks the milk policies are retaliatory and unfair. I say, well, then deal with the milk guys. Well, we can't because they're very powerful. I said, well, if you don't deal with them, then you're going to have these tariffs. Are you telling me that all 100 of the biggest companies in Canada collectively are not as powerful as the milk guys? No, you just have to make things a little ugly. And so, look, the way we do politics in the U.S., tends to be more aggressive, more in your face, more about grassroots mobilization, more about, reaching the public and persuading them aggressively. And that's not the Canadian way. And by the way, they may be nicer people than we are. But when it comes to winning these knife fights in politics, niceness isn't the path to victory.
Yeah. What's your dog in this fight, Bradley? As the president takes office, we try to figure out, where they're, because three of the people he's appointed to key antitrust positions in are people who have been critical of big tech, for instance. And yet here's everybody. I mean, it's almost like your point, like they know if you want to catch his attention, you got to go right to the, and do something, right? So I'm curious what you think all of this is signaling.
Yeah, I think, look, with Trump, he's only interested in Trump. He's only loyal to Trump. He only believes in. I do like the appointments that they made to the FTC and DOJ, and I think J.D. Vance. And so they know that that's their only path to success here. From a broader policy standpoint, I actually would love to see the work that Biden did around big tech antitrust continue, simply because I'm an early stage tech investor, and no one ever comes to me and says, hey, I've got an idea to take on Google or Apple or Microsoft, right? It's just considered absurd because they have so much monopolistic power that there's not even...
Bradley, let me ask you about that for a second, because I've heard a bit of the opposite take on that, which is if you want to back early stage companies who have no real hope of an exit, other than if they reach the scale to compete with Apple and Microsoft, the fact that those big companies can't acquire you takes out a major exit strategy, and therefore puts kind of a chill across the early VC space, which right now, as we know, is very quiet. The IPO market also very quiet, and so forth.
Yeah, so I think the chill is the result, I would argue, mainly of the FTC not distinguishing between big tech and everyone else, and just saying we generally don't like mergers, we generally don't like economic deals, and that resulted in not just a less of big tech buying companies, but just less M&A across the board and fewer IPOs across the board, and that has resulted in a real lack of activity. Look, ultimately, if you look at the history of this country, every single company that has seemed like inevitable and indomitable, whether it's Standard Oil or IBM or General Electric or whoever it is, over time, everyone grows bureaucratic, everyone grows stagnant, everyone becomes less innovative, and those companies fade away. And my concern for the American economy is if we're not seeding the replacements for those, the big companies today, and all we're doing is teeing up acquisitions, when invariably the people who were at the inauguration yesterday retire and their replacements are not nearly as good, and all of a sudden those companies start lagging, if we don't have other companies ready to step and take their place, it's going to be Chinese companies.
Yeah.
So I think that in order to protect the American economy long term, you have to have viable alternatives.
Let's talk about China for a moment. I don't know how closely you follow. Is it DeepSeek that Deirdre was just telling us about, this AI startup? Is it really as good as those who would know better than I are saying? And what are these competing EOs on AI? I mean, who has the best strategy on this front? If we say, forget, the whatever happens inside the U.S. with big tech taking over small firms, who is going to win the AI race, and are we well positioned?
Right. I mean, a few things. So keep in mind, when it comes to AI, every few days there's going to be some new development that says this is now the best thing, and everything else is substandard. And also, venture capitalists like me, we talk our book, right? And so we will promote on Twitter or whatever else, here's this innovative new technology, or if we're trying to push someone else in a different direction, here's why the Chinese are getting ahead of us. So I would take it all with a grain of salt. But overall, Trump rescinded Biden's executive order yesterday on AI, and I was fine with that because the Biden EO, to me, just really was kind of toothless. It had a lot of words in it, a lot of sort of stuff that I think sounds good in think tanks inside the Beltway, but was neither really focused on helping American companies who are in the AI space compete with Chinese, or even really protecting consumers, right? Like, I do think that there is an obligation to protect the people against the potential harms of AI. We failed to do that with social media. We never put in any sort of privacy regulations. We never gave the platforms any legal incentive to try to protect kids. And we've had this massive spike in teenage suicide and self-harm and cyberbullying and eating disorders and all kinds of terrible things. I'm the parent of two teenagers, so I just see this in real life.
Yeah.
I think every parent of every kid and every teenager can relate to this. So abdicating the responsibility is not acceptable, but at the same time, recognizing that we exist in a global world and that U.S. companies are not only competing with each other, but competing with Chinese companies and Japanese companies and Korean, that's important too. So I hope Trump and David Sachs can strike the right balance here.
Well, I hope you got some Trump coin. Not
yet, but I'm keeping an eye on it.
But what is the big takeaway from that? That it runs on Solana, so bullish for Solana. Like, are these even like legal? I guess it's all legal. I don't know. The whole thing is confusing.
Oftentimes, and this is just true of my work in general, when you're investing in new technologies and regulated industries, it's often unclear what is and isn't legal, because if the bureaucrats who regulate technology could have been the people to think of the new technologies, they need to be entrepreneurs and not bureaucrats.
Right.
So frequently, regulation almost always lags innovation.
Isn't that what we just talked about with social media, Bradley? Regulation lags innovation. At the very least, you have to catch up once you know the evils. Bradley, appreciate it today. Bradley Tusk from Tusk Venture Partners joining us. Coming up, while it's been a volatile month for Meta, the shares are still up more than 5%. Needham's Laura Martin